Yeah, I mean, pro-lifers are always going on and on about how mean I am. Like,
sorry.
Idiot.
Hello and welcome to episode 41 of the Liberator podcast. I'm Sam Riley. This is James Silberman, and sort of the subject of today's episode is T. Russell Hunter. He's been causing problems for far too long, and this is going to be an episode where we address some of that. So what we're really doing today is we're talking about it's a very common argument somehow. Argument.
Yep. Hey, you guys being a little mean.
To dismiss.
Whenever people make bad arguments and you go, well, I'm going to deal with your argument, that's mean.
Yeah, it's mean. Basically, it's this ad hominem argument against Russell Hunter that says that I don't have to take any abolitionist seriously because T. Russell Hunter is a big jerk. He's just a mean person.
Either is or was.
And then he hasn't apologized to me personally about it. Yeah. Even if it's not, this individual has never talked to Russell Hunter. It's almost as if they expect Russell to come out and personally apologize for everything that he's previously believed in order for them to process what he continues to believe.
Our friend Callie has been trying to get pro-lifers to debate him, on whether or not children should have equal protection and abortion should be fully criminalized on incrementalism. And he can't get anyone to debate him. And the reason given in these instances is they say, well, no, T. Russell Hunter was really mean back in the day, and if he wants to call and apologize, my phone, I'll pick up. But I'm not dealing with abolitionism until Russell apologizes for how mean he was, and that's literally what they say in order to avoid debating the issue. And
a lot of that, just honestly, it causes a certain amount of soul searching or like thinking, because you go, man, that's because I see that. It's like I'm out of town or I'm traveling, and I'm not really on Facebook at all, but I'm getting tagged and stuff, and I pick it up, and it's like you making fun of how everyone says it or something, but Callie saying, yeah, I try to debate someone and I can't, I want to debate them about like criminalizing abortion versus trying to end it without criminalizing abortion or whatever, second victim or not. And I'm trying to get an intellectual theological debate with a pro-life leader, and the pro-life leader tells Callie, I'm not going to debate abolitionists. And Callie's like, why? And because T. Russell Hunter is mean. Mm-hmm. And so it's a weird form. Now, that's not the kind of argument that they would say is valid, like if a pro-choicer made against them. Like they would train people, like when someone argues that way, that person's being disingenuous or they're a debating trick or whatever. I guess me pointing that out is kind of mean, but I'm not trying to say that to be mean, but that's the sort of thing that whenever you look at that, when I look at that on its face, I'm like, okay, this person is not being serious. They don't want to debate Callie, and they're using this because when it all comes down to it, let's say I was mean. I was a really meanie head, super jerk. That wouldn't in and of itself mean that the ideology of abolitionism, components of an abolition bill, the general theological beliefs of an abolitionist were invalid. And that's just a standard thing. But at the same time, I don't want to be mean. I don't want to be known as mean. And actually, when you're trying to spread an idea or cultivate a movement or something like that, it isn't wise to be mean. So
at least unnecessarily.
Yeah. And so, and I definitely don't think that I'm perfect or anything like that. But when I see that stuff, I generally, and I'm opening up, you guys. I generally go,
thanks a lot.
Get a little, you're welcome. I generally look at it and I usually like ask my wife or somebody, and I'm like, am I mean? Like, So there's a little, so I want to be honest and charitable with the accusations. Now, I do appreciate it. A lot of times people who know me well or have been around me, they'll say something like, oh, okay, so he's mean. You're saying he's so mean that it justifies you not defending your opposition to abolitionism. Can I see a screenshot? Usually the pro-lifer will say, oh, and I've got screenshots.
Yeah.
And then the abolitionist will be like, oh, okay, then show them. And then the pro-lifer will be like, I don't have to. He's been mean. Everybody knows it. But honestly, like if there were actual screenshots or video or something where I was being mean, like legitimately mean, as a Christian who wants to grow in sanctification, be more like Christ, I would want to know those things and change them.
Yeah. And it usually is just, people will say they have screenshots and they never provide the screenshots.
Yeah.
But then there's like a few examples that just stick in people's mind more. And then they don't give any context for what those are. Like, I don't know if how much we want to go into them, like the imprecatory prayer video type thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly definitely, so just, we're not going to make this whole episode about me, but there's definitely been a sense where back in 2000, whatever it was, 11 and 12, sort of getting abolitionist ideas up and out. There is a sort of harsh as truth, uncompromising as justice, going on Facebook and, whatever, saying, we're all guilty. Mm-hmm. And I think that some of the abolitionist rhetoric early on, it was so radically different that it wasn't necessarily mean, but it was kind of bull in the china shop. But I don't really, I mean, there's always been a part of me as a person that's kind of like, I don't want to screw up like the appeal of these ideas. So I want to try to moderate it to some extent. I don't want to be offensive. So, but I noticed that, like, you make the imprecatory prayer video. Like at one point in time, some sort of abolitionist or would-be abolitionist or pro-lifers or whoever, just different people, were saying that AHA people, people who adopted the ideology of abolitionism before it was popular, before it was cool, insert whatever meme you want to put there. Yeah. People were saying that AHA people were jihadis, were going to be blowing up abortion clinics. And then there were these two young men who, before they were even Christians, had done something with like a Molotov cocktail, like at a construction site. And some people were saying that they had no right to be abolitionist or call churches to repent of abortion apathy because of this previous sin. And it was actually in offense of what I thought was the gospel, that like, no, come on, we believe the gospel. People can change. And so, yes, I made like I think it was like an unhinged video. So, I mean, I've done things like that where I sort of like passionately go insane, whether it's right or wrong, about the fact that I live in a culture where 63 million image bearers have been murdered in the midst of 100 million professing Bible-believing churches.
You were right in that case.
Just to be completely clear on this, it's like that instance, for the people using that as like proof that Russell Hunter is a bad guy, that's the dumbest possible example you can use, because that was just a clear-cut example of, you should not be using this example of before these people were Christians as a way of completely disavowing the entire abolitionist movement, and you shouldn't even be using it against these individuals. Yeah, it's a messed up, evil thing to do, and you shouldn't do it.
And people never include the context. They always just say, "Oh, Russell was praying imprecatory prayers." People were calling you jihadis for something these abolitionists had done before they were saved.
Yeah,
and saying you were going to go blow up something. Yeah, despite what you clearly said, we're a non-violent movement.
Yeah, and it was against everything we were doing. And just some of the people watching this now won't know. Most of the people that are brought up in that video are now abolitionists, now agree with us.
All three of them, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's one of these things where there's a certain disingenuousness leaving out the context, but then going, okay, so where does Russell, it's so weird to talk, where do I get this thing? And did I used to be some way and now I'm a different way? It's like, I've never not been occasionally prone to being very passionately opposed to abortion apathy or to denials of the gospel. And so I don't want to apologize for any of that. I rewatched that video the other day, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, holy smokes, like, I agree with my younger, unhinged self. You know, I mean, this young man is very angry that people are saying that you can't be changed or grow in grace and knowledge.
Not to dwell on this one example too much, because there are many examples like this, but this is just to show that this is one of the things that pro-lifers use so often.
Yes.
And they leave out all the context. And again, you were given the context, you were absolutely justified in saying, Lord, reveal it against them if they're wrong, and reveal it against abolitionists if we're wrong. You were absolutely justified.
That was the content of the imprecating, as I like to say.
Yes, and the imprecating, and I think you brought it up originally, and we kind of dwelled on it maybe too long here.
Yeah.
But recently, John Van Maren brought it up. It's like a footnote, and he's like, listen, you're like, James White even thinks, it's like James White doesn't think that immediatism is unbiblical anymore.
And people still use that video.
I was in North Carolina. Someone's using that video. It's just a very, Blake Gideon, he's used that video.
When you use the word imprecatory prayer, people know what that means. Like Russell was not praying that God would strike down men, like
literally praying,
like Dr. James White. Like I love Dr. White. We all love Dr. White, and so that was not the content of what it was. It was reveal it against us if we're wrong. That was the imprecatory prayer in that.
Yeah, it was a across the board. Listen, there's a bunch of this going on. It's crazy.
So he included himself.
So
in it.
God, do something to show, the truth here. So there's that sort of thing. And I think before then and at various early times, just imagine you're pro-life, you're supporting things like, at that time it was fetal pain bills, and some people come up on the scene, memes on Facebook, so on and so forth, and it's all this sort of stop fighting ageism with ageism. Mm-hmm. You're an organization that's like, fight ageism, and you're supporting a 20-week fetal pain bill, and some no-name Yahoo on Facebook is saying supporting a bill that protects babies after they reach a specific age of 20 weeks is dumb. Like, so I'd be like, that's dumb. Like that, that's ageist. I may even say it's dumb. I just may say it's ageist. I think the attack on that kind of specific kind of proposition, like the podcast you guys did last week where you did all these pro-life arguments or rhetoric and stuff, attacking the pro-life ideas, rhetoric, bills, showing them to be inconsistent, hypocritical, whatever it would be, I think was interpreted as mean to people,
right? And
in an attempt to not deal with, I think that guy's got a point. Right. He was like, oh, you're being mean.
Yeah.
And that stuck, and that became an effective thing, and it spread. I've never met a pro-life leader. And it's like I'm nobody, but I've met like pro-life people, like pro-life leaders or like lower, and they all know who I am and that I'm mean.
Yep.
Sometimes you'll talk to them for 40 or 50 minutes and they'll be like, well, if all abolitionists were as nice as you and not like that evil T. Russell Hunter guy, I'd probably be an abolitionist myself. And I'm like, well, hi, my name's T. Russell Hunter. It's like one of those things. It's just it's gone
right. And so we're going to get into all that, more examples, and also just get into abolitionist rhetoric as you're talking about how it's perceived as mean, but it's the ideas. It's not that any unnecessary meanness is added to it. It's these ideas are very offensive to people who have been pursuing an incremental strategy for a long, long time. And so we're going to get into that. But before we kind of get into the real content, this is the Liberator podcast again, and we do what we do in this podcast and our lobbying activities based on your guys' support. And so we need donations. And so if you're not a monthly member, go to freethestates.org/donate. Become a monthly supporter of what we do, and if you do, you will get entered to win some art.
Yep,
and so if you give $25 a month or more, your name goes into this, and you get entered into the drawing. Yeah, very cool artwork,
and we are very thankful that this is growing.
Yeah, heaping almost.
It's heaping. Well, we have to smash it down, but we always circulate it a lot.
Yeah.
We just gave away the Liberator Abolition, Not Regulation. Does that mean that I drew a picture of Wilberforce and put abolition, not regulation on it with a quote from him on the back?
Oh, yeah.
Because Wilberforce was very explicit in his own writings and speeches that he was for abolition and, quote, not regulation, end quote.
To call people wrong is mean-spirited.
You might say hateful.
It's pubescent.
Yeah. So we just gave away the art from my previous pubescent asinine hate crime of quoting William Wilberforce for people who like to misquote him. But we gave that away. This is the piece that we are giving away now. It is the Free the States mission statement that we've used this on some memes, but our mission, free the states from their participation in the American abortion holocaust, abolition and state sovereignty. So just a nice little pen and ink drawing that exists because you guys kept us at work producing this material. So we want to, draw a name and give some art to some.
We'll give that away last episode of June. So become a donor and you can enter your name to win.
Yep.
Also, go check out our store. Lots of good stuff on there. T-shirts, pamphlets, drop cards, signs, lots of good stuff. Yep. So go to store.freethestates.org. And also share this podcast.
Members get a discount.
Yes, members get a 15% discount. So this podcast, I think a lot of important stuff is being talked about. And so subscribe on whatever podcast apps you use. Share this episode on Facebook, all that good stuff.
Yeah, we really do appreciate it, primarily because we have decided to do this because we think that if people, particular Bible-believing Christians, if they come into contact with these arguments and these ideas, they will embrace them.
Yeah. The arguments are real good. And even if people are saying T. Russell Hunter is the meanest person in the entire world, these arguments are very powerful and they're going to win out, but we need them to be spread. We need them to be circulated by all of you guys. So please help us.
So let's get back into that.
Yeah.
Oh, so interestingly enough, it is possible to adopt the ideology of abolitionism, even thinking that I've been mean.
Yeah.
James here is actually a prime example.
I thought you were too. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I know. We did a whole episode where you said, kill him, stone him.
Yeah.
That was with Rachel. Rachel thought, surely he's mean and has been mean, and did a deep dive and went all through Facebook and searched me and plus, pro-life leaders. And she was like, I felt really good. She called me up and she's like, I'm sorry. I believe that you're really mean, but I've just read comments for years and years and years. And you never really were all that mean to people, just our ideas. And you were right. So I thought that was really good. That was one of the best things. Mm-hmm. But James, when you contacted me, or we were talking, and it was kind of like James was with Created Equal and thinking about the arguments for abolitionism and willing to be like, okay, everyone says how mean you guys are, but I'm still going to look into your ideas. Yeah. And then back in Seattle in 2017, or was it 2018, 2017? Yep. You're like, we were going to be doing an activism project there to sort of call Seattle to repentance and for being a bunch of closed-minded bigots. That was mean. But we were there doing that, doing some work, and James knew about it, and James messaged me up. He's like, hey, gonna come hang out with me. So you were willing to come meet with us and see whether these things were true.
Yeah. The idea that you were mean, and I think you and more broadly abolitionists as well, but especially you, it was very inculcated in me from very early on in my time in the pro-life movement. But for me, it was never even a thought that would have occurred to me that this means I should not engage with these ideas. And so I engage with the ideas, and I think this is right, but I still think, well, it's still probably true that they were mean. Everyone I talk to seems to say that.
Yeah.
And so, my position early on was I'm going to be the nice abolitionist, and, these people might make it hard for me to communicate it because they're so mean, but I'm not going to give anyone any excuse, and these ideas will just have to win against the pro-life incrementalist argument because they're just so much better. Clearly, there's no way anyone could project this unless people were being really mean. So they must have been really mean, and that's what made it hard. Yeah. But then early on, I'm talking to people on Facebook. This lady who works for CareNet back in where I grew up in Washington, and I was so nice, like nuancing the crap out of every single assertion I made, qualifying everything. And she just loses her mind on me.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, oh shoot, this isn't going well. And then I say, hey, can we meet up for coffee? This is someone I'd met, to strategize for other political issues, other campaigns and stuff that we'd worked together on. And so we've talked in person before. And so hey, let's just meet up. Let's talk in person. Maybe the internet medium is skewing this thing. And she says, no, I think just even seeing you would cause me to sin in anger right now. And I'm like, what just happened? Like,
I
what
thought if
is
I
going
just
on?
was really nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that it showed me pretty early on that it wasn't, that's not to say there's never been an abolitionist who was more abrasive than they had a right to be there. I'm sure that's happened.
Yeah.
But that's not the core of the issue. The core of the issue is these ideas offend the pride of pro-lifers who don't want to concede that they haven't been going about things rightly. That's the core of it. And there's no amount of nuancing or qualifying that can get around that. Now, again, that's not an excuse for abolitionists to go be jerks. Yeah. You should be gracious, especially as you're explaining to someone for the first or second time. Like, be patient, labor with people, give them a real chance to understand what you're saying before you go to anything more abrasive. But that's not why the pro-life leaders reject abolitionism.
Yeah. And it seems to me that most abolitionists are very, readily willing to accept correction too. When they haven't been very gracious to someone, a lot of the abolitionists that I've talked to, when I've witnessed something like that, when I've talked to them, they're humble and they're willing to change their mind about something.
Yep.
Yeah. On the other hand, pro-lifers who have said some ridiculously evil and messed up stuff are not willing to take that same standard of correction and public apology when they've erred.
Yeah. It's a little strange because it makes me think of, like, pro-lifers will sort of give this sort of over the top allowance to, like, the pro-choicers or, that they're debating.
Yeah, that's what really gives it away.
Yeah, it's kind of like this. I won't debate abolitionists because they're mean. But I will debate these people
who are pro-genocide,
and, like, really, really actually are mean to them.
Yeah.
So the whole, like,
that guy threw a water bottle at my head, and I was trying to debate him still. But Russell Hunter, I'm not going to talk to him.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, and I think, but this is an example of it. I was like, if they're watching this right now, they're getting angry with the fact that basically implicit to what we're saying is, they don't want to deal with the argument, and so they do the very thing that they train people not to do, and they go ad hominem. And it's so strange because you're dealing with someone like a Scott Klusendorf or someone who works under him, where this is a standard thing that would be a good thing that he teaches, like in books on how to debate people. Like, and when you're debating somebody about some kind of proposition, if they sort of go off, oh yeah, instead of me debating your proposition, I want to talk about how, like, you acted at some point or something you did or something like that. The person's lost the debate. And so they would generally teach that, but then readily use that argument, like, in spades right now. It's really getting out there. But before we leave your story, James, like, I mean, I think you moved here, to try to, like, help. I mean, you can say whether, I don't know, but I think there's a certain sense where Free the States started, and it was kind of because abolition bills were starting to be filed, pastors were starting to actually sort of embrace abolitionism. There were abolitionist candidates like Dan Fisher. Abolitionism was clearly gaining some ground. You'd become convinced that it was biblical and good and the best approach.
Yeah. And
I think kind of there's the proponents of this view have been sort of hotheads or something. And so I'm speaking as James, I'm a level-headed, kind, young person who doesn't have this reputation as being mean. And I'll move there. And for the sake of the movement, I will level out whatever weirdness Russell has or whatever meanness he has, and we will spread this stuff. And then I think you found out, oh man, maybe it was actually the ideas. I mean, because there's a certain sense where I'm sitting, I remember you saying some stuff like when you visited, like, and I just remember sitting there thinking kind of like, this guy's going to try to, like, convince people that abolitionism is biblical and he's going to do it really well. And they're going to, like, hate him for it. Biblical principle. I mean, it's like, was Jesus mean? No, they rejected him because of what he said, because they loved their sin. They liked darkness, and he was light. I'm not saying I'm Jesus. My goodness, don't go there with your ad homs. But is something true whenever you make an argument or point out something that to the person who holds that, it goes to the heart of some kind of sin or inconsistency. You're faced with the opportunity to say, "Oh, whoa, change,"
Right.
or kind of double down and say, "Well, you're mean,"
and dig in your heels.
Pretty anyone who does evangelism is used to dealing with this.
And so,
judge not.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, anytime you go out, you're preaching the righteousness of God and the grace of God and the kingdom of God or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like you will literally be like, people will be like, well, who are you? And blah, you're mean.
And that's especially the case when, the thing that's being criticized is such a big part of that person's identity.
Yeah.
And that is like when you're a pro-life employee or a pro-life employer, it's a huge part of your identity, right? You fight abortion. You're part of this great kind of human rights struggle of our age. Like it's a big thing. And the pro-lifers have been in the trenches together for a long time. And so they identify very, very deeply with the pro-life movement. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of why the reaction is as strong as it is when that thing is criticized, because they identify so deeply with the thing being criticized.
Yeah.
And so. Yeah,
when they say, no, he attacked me. And I'm always like, man, sometimes it's like, I don't even know who you are. I don't remember attacking you, but when did I attack you?
Yeah.
And you'll beg for a screenshot or some kind of an evidence. And if you do get it, you'll look at it and it's like, oh, I wasn't attacking you. I was attacking the sort of ideology of bowing to the Supreme Court. Like I didn't say anything about you, but I did say that, that pro-life arguments or pro-life bills are written in subservience to the Supreme Court as though the Supreme Court's God. Yeah. That person had so identified pro-life and that argument with themselves that literally attacking the proposition was attacking the person. And what's so odd is, and I know this, and I'm just saying this before God and all witnesses, before I was even abolitionist, back when I was a philosophy student at the University of Oklahoma, I was very into always attack the propositions, don't attack the person. Kind of like what Klusendorf or any of these guys would teach. Attack propositions, not the person. And so coming on the scene with abolitionism and attacking all those pro-life propositions and then them being so attacked as persons, that's what it is. It's those propositions are their identity.
Right.
And of course, maybe you could say, well, if that's true, then you need to be a little more light, a little more gracious. And, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's also, I think, one of the reasons it oftentimes gets so contentious is because there's so many straw men against abolitionist arguments, and you have to repeat yourself and say it differently so many different times in online discussions, and it just seems like the person you're talking to does not want to understand what you're saying, and they don't want to represent you correctly. And that's the impression you get a lot of the times when you talk to pro-lifers, and so things do get elevated on both sides oftentimes, but then the people who are looking at it, who are pro-lifers, only see the abolitionists rising sort of to the level of the situation where they're getting angry about the fact that people aren't representing them correctly. It's like, so abolitionists do their best to represent why the pro-life movement does what they do, what their view is, that it's a strategy to abolish abortion incrementally and all that. But for whatever reason, it seems that we cannot get a pro-lifer to accurately represent what we're saying. And that's really frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in the frustrating, you can, different people act differently. Mm-hmm. It's not something that's just common to abolitionists only. It's common to people.
Yeah. Right.
When you're debating and people are constantly strawmanning you or they're misrepresenting your arguments or something like that, you can be mean. Now, so the question is have I been perfect? No. Do I know which instances I've been mean or not mean? I have no idea. That assess them, individually or something like that.
Yeah.
But I have seen abolitionists in those kinds of back and forths get sort of put out. Mm-hmm. I've seen pro-lifers. I've seen young earth creationist, intelligent design, Darwinist. I've seen Republicans, Democrats. People, when they argue, can get mean.
Yeah.
Usually, though, the person who's getting mean is the person who's losing.
Yeah.
And I have seen that a lot on the other side.
Maybe this will segue a bit into our next point, too. I think part of it, too, is that pro-lifers do not see the legitimacy to our arguing with them. Like, they want us to focus on the pro-choicers, and they don't want us to focus on pro-lifers at all. And they don't understand that at all. They don't understand why we're taking the time to debate them about anything.
Like that, I think that may be something that's offensive. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not actually being mean or hateful, but to say, I think one of the things that I've been saying from the beginning has been, in the 1830s, the abolitionists came on the scene saying that slavery was wrong. Lots of people have been saying that, but the way it had been being fought was also wrong. In that sort of immediatism, incrementalism, historiographical stuff, and then saying abolitionists agree with pro-lifers that abortion's wrong, but we also argue that the way that we've been tolerating it or treating it incrementally has also been an error. And so for Christians to come on the scene and to fight both pro-choicers and pro-lifers, and to treat the pro-lifers almost like I would say that we spend, I don't know, 10 times as much time and energy trying to point out errors in pro-life ideological and strategic or legislative approaches and so on and so forth than pro-choicers. And that's primarily because we live in, like, Oklahoma. We focus on states where there are conservative majorities, Christian majorities, and we have the power and the ability to abolish abortion. And the only thing that keeps us from abolishing abortion is choosing to regulate it instead. So we spend most of our time fighting regulationists. Now, at the same time, we do fight abortion itself and expose it as evil with images of abortion. We do preach the gospel to those who are stumbling to to take their children away to death at the clinics and all that kind of stuff. But I think pro-lifers I'm trying to think about from their point of view. Here we are fighting pro-aborts and pro-lifers at the same time. And they're like, what in the world? Who do these people think they are? Mm-hmm. So I can see how they get it, that in and of itself is offensive, but the response ought to be, why are they saying this? It's like, well, because your leaders are voting against bills to abolish abortion, et cetera.
Right. So this thing that a lot of people object to, like Jonathan Van Maren in his recent podcast talked a lot about, is how we say that pro-lifers are preventing abortion from being abolished. Now, they object to that. They think it's the meanest slander they've ever heard in their entire lives.
Oh, yeah.
They think it's just not the worst thing you can say. And, it's pretty bad. And that's probably one of the worst things you could say, is that someone is fighting against the abolition of abortion. Mm-hmm. We can't not say that.
Yeah, I get it.
We have to say that.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
Like I said, in Oklahoma, it's not pro-abortion people have no power in the Oklahoma state government. None. They've got 19 out of 101 seats in the House, and they've got 9 out of 48 in the Senate, 0 statewide offices. They've got no power. And so abolishing abortion in a state like ours, or in a state like, I think everywhere an abolition bill was introduced this session, 2021, it was pro-life majorities in both houses and a pro-life governor. I think it's every single state, except for Maryland. Maryland would be the one exception.
And
every other state.
And the constitutional amendment in North Carolina.
And even the leaders in the pro-life movement who aren't involved with killing our bills are still running cover for the people who kill our bills.
Yeah.
Right. Saying things like, inseverability and all these different things are issues when they're not issues. But they bring them up to the general pro-life public to make it seem like what we're doing is a bad thing and what they're doing by killing abolition bills is a good thing.
Yeah. We're not. It's one of these things where it's like, okay.
Like even Jonathan Van Maren did that in the podcast too.
What did he do?
He said that it's going to get rid of all the pro-life regulations on the books.
He was trying to give a defense for opposing abolition bills.
Mm-hmm.
So
So they say something like, "We're not keeping abortion legal. This is asinine. I can't believe you would say that we're keeping abortion legal." And you're like, well, the context of the statement was a 10-0 vote against a bill to abolish abortion, wherein the majority of those 10 people were pro-lifers putting forward pro-life bills. It's not like, I don't think we're saying, that's where it's weird. It's like we're saying something that's true. That's like evidentially true. It's not sort of like a rational argument, or an argument about motives. Like it's one of these things like, you're saying my motive is to keep abortion legal. I'm like, no, your motive is to pray to end abortion or all the things that you say. You have this motive to you are pro-life, you don't like abortion, you're against abortion, but when it came down to it and you had the opportunity to support a bill to abolish abortion or put all your time, money, and energy into a bill to regulate the treatment of babies' bodies if they survive abortion or something like that, I'm saying you focused on that and you let all the church people to focus on that. That's what passed instead of that. It was a substitute. You could have passed this, you couldn't. You're keeping abortion legal by default, like that. I think that when we say that stuff, it's seen as offensive. They need to stop and go, okay, but what are they saying? Is it true? And that's just super difficult.
Yeah.
And I think it's at that point where the particularly intelligent ones, like you're talking about like John Van Maren, gets to the point where it's like the argument is starting to click. And I'm not John Van Maren. I don't know. I'm not speaking for him, but there's a point where it's like this argument is starting to click, and no, you guys are being mean, or like something like that seems to be happening out there. But the point is that the pro-lifers don't like us saying they're keeping abortion legal. The answer to that is to join us in abolishing abortion, not kill our bills.
Yeah.
Prove to us, don't say that we're being mean and that no, you want to end abortion with us or something like that. Prove it by putting your organizational clout, reputations, your what you write, your blog post, because we've had these abolition bills that are straight up treating abortion as murder, seeking to criminalize it, going forth in these states. And if they haven't been opposed by pro-lifers showing up at committee hearings to actually literally sort of like oppose them, they've been dead silent. I don't know of a single, is there a single pro-life organization on board for any abolition bill anywhere?
That have put out a post.
A Facebook post.
Not substantial support, but there have been, our former organization has put out posts saying this is a good bill, people should support it.
Yeah, like when you were there writing the
I know
post.
the team is, the Created Equal team has prayed for the bill before as a team.
Yeah. And there may be more examples of that we don't know about, so we don't want to like just broad brush it.
Yeah.
But I do think,
and it's one of those things too, where I mean, like internally, like the leadership, like Mark, for example, like he'll put up a post saying that he supports the bill, but then he'll argue with me or with Austin or whoever else that the bill shouldn't be supported in private, and so
this is the sort of thing that I say that's mean. Some of these posts that are put up are so that they can actually win an argument on the side. No, I supported it. Mm-hmm. Sorry. I interrupted you, Sam.
Oh no, I was just making the point that it seems to me that they don't really believe in the bill even when they support it, but they'll put up something just to get people off their back, where they say, okay, well we put up something, we said something, so you can stop saying that we're not supporting abolition bills or we're part of killing abolition bills or whatever.
Yeah, you went on to say the thing that was mean.
Yeah.
My bad. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Oh.
Jerk. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of this that goes on out there. But obviously, abolitionists, we look at it and we go, "What in the heck is going on with these pro-lifers?" Now, James advances the notes here for us to a picture, a drawing of Mr. Greg Treat licking a boot.
Yeah.
Who would do that?
The boot says the federal government. I would say this does technically fall under the category of mean.
Appropriately so.
And accurate.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's one of these things like, well, okay, Greg Treat, who has been one of the principal actors in the death of abolition bills in Oklahoma, the state where it would probably be the easiest to abolish abortion anywhere in the United States. Greg Treat, in a recent opposition to a bill to put together a committee in Oklahoma that would assess federal rules and whether they were constitutional, sort of a state sovereignty thing, he opposed that. And in his opposition to that, it was pretty clear that it's like he knew that he had to oppose it because he's opposed abolition bills because abolition bills are nullification bills.
Right. And so Greg Treat, that obviously no one likes to be drawn that way,
That's mean.
But if bootlicker is a concept, right? If that's a real thing that's out there, like Greg Treat is like the definition of it. Like there's no like he thinks the states must submit unconditionally to the federal government. And the result of that is that 5,000 babies are murdered in our state every single year. And so, I write an article, you draw this image.
Yeah.
And
I read your article, or you told me something about like you're going to call Greg Treat a bootlicker.
Right.
I was like, well, I can draw that.
Yeah. And so, I think it was my just to draw the meanness in my direction in this instance. I think I actually suggested this drawing.
Yeah. Got me in trouble.
Yeah. And so, so we write an article about our position on HB. Yeah, on HB 1236, which was just a state sovereignty bill. It didn't have anything to do with abortion specifically, but was just about state sovereignty. Now, Treat opposed this bill. He said, nullification is a failed legal theory that's has been debunked. All this stuff. That's not even how theories. You can't debunk an action. It's a thing that you do when your superior is wrong. You can't debunk an action.
Yeah, and it's not mean for you to point that out.
Yeah,
but see, the thing is that there's a man that said that stupid thing, and you say that thing's stupid. That's one of those things where it's like, oh, so you're saying I'm stupid.
Yeah, and so he reads a part of that article on the floor of the Senate and says this group. He called us a church coalition. I don't know why he thinks Free the States is a church coalition. We have churches who support us, but we're not like a church coalition.
Yeah.
But anyway, he said this is a church coalition, but they're so mean and they poorly represent Christ. And then he reads a couple sentences from the article in which Greg Treat is referred to as a federal bootlicker. And this is supposedly this really mean thing, but it's just true. And we have to point out that this view that you must submit unconditionally to the federal government is extremely wrong, and it's extremely evil, and it's the root cause, one of the root causes of 5,000 babies being murdered every year in our state.
Yeah,
we can't not call that out. We have to.
Yeah, and I think also just to add another piece to it as well is that not every pro-lifer is the same. They're not all created equal. I still like Mark Harrington. I respect him. I think he's really good at organizing things. I think he's a really funny guy. Greg Treat, on the other hand, he has a different case where he has done so many obviously evil things, obviously stupid things. And so if someone were to say Greg Treat is either stupid or he's evil, and just state that might seem really mean, but in Greg Treat's case, he has done so many evil things. He's got a track record of killing abolition bills, allowing babies to be murdered year after year in Oklahoma,
and telling all sorts of lies about the content of the bill, saying it's a secession bill, it's a Civil War bill.
Yeah. So I'm not going to say the same type of thing about Greg Treat as I say about every single pro-lifer, but sometimes pro-lifers will see us addressing specific individuals, and they'll say, "Oh, they're saying this about me." No, I'm not. Like, this is Greg Treat's record. He's done stupid things, evil things, and so it applies to him. It doesn't necessarily apply to every single pro-lifer out there.
But Greg Treat is a pro-lifer, and according to some people's arguments, he'd be like a pro-life hero. He is the author of a bill, a trigger bill, to abolish abortion in the event that the Supreme Court overthrows Roe v. Wade.
Right.
That is a major success for pro-lifers.
He spoke at Rose Day. I mean, he is a pro-life hero. Yeah.
He's not some kind of rhino. He's not misrepresentative. So I think that in a certain sense, if Greg Treat were doing these things in a state where there were not abolitionist organizations and so on and so forth, he would just be praised by even the kind of pro-lifers that we don't want to lump him in with. He's just becoming very, very clearly anti-abolitionist because he's in the place, in the position. But it is a textbook example. It's straight, like we're saying, assert state sovereignty to fight federal overreach. Somebody's written a bill saying in Oklahoma, because they're worried about like Joe Biden taking their guns or whatever. And so they're willing to assert state sovereignty to nullify federal gun bans.
Yep.
And Greg Treat's like, that's wrong, because he's already said it's wrong for abolition and he's trying to justify himself.
Yep.
Yeah.
And in the process, doesn't say it's wrong because of this. He says it's wrong. There's this organization and they're not Christ-like. Textbook ad hoc. I mean, so you can say, listen, I wouldn't say this about Mark Harrington or whatever, but it's the same thing. It's like abolitionists making argument. Instead of dealing with argument, these people are mean.
Yep.
James Silberman, I won't name him, but he's unchristlike in what he said. Read the thing.
And the funny thing about that is that article came out before the image did. And so the article with our statement for HB 1236 came out, and I called Greg Treat a bootlicker. And then the article refuting all the arguments Greg Treat makes against state sovereignty, which laid them all out, and then it had the image, came out the next day. So it's like we wrote the article, he flips out about it on the floor of the Senate, and then we like ramp it up to like 11 the next day.
It's like, these people aren't very Christ-like.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to draw you now. But it wasn't done in any kind of retaliation.
Yeah, we didn't even know he mentioned us on the floor of the Senate until a few days afterward.
Yeah, someone later.
Yeah.
You know, but again, it's textbook like ad hom type shift. These people are saying this thing. Don't listen to what they're saying.
For himself too. It's like, oh, poor Greg.
Yeah.
You're so mean to me. No, don't call other people not Christ-like when you kill abolition bills and allow 5,000 babies to die in Oklahoma every year. Like, you have a pattern of doing this. I don't think you have a place to say.
Yeah. But it's definitely like the argument that you're not Christ-like is used against the people who are generally standing up for the things that Christ would want his church to be standing up for. I notice it as kind of like a repeating theme, because the world has this idea that Jesus is this sort of, super
nice
hippie guy. And it's like, because I remember that happening, and I was kind of like, a pastor friend of ours messaged about that, and I was like, oh, I want to see the comments or whatever, and and I thought it was the drawing, but you're right, it was the drawing came out afterwards. Yeah. But of course, he's looking at this. It's an article from Free the States. Oh, Russell's mean, but it's you being mean. And then I did the because you made me do the cartoon, but it took me an extra day.
Yeah, well, he won't be able to say it's not Christ-like if you just draw his face on a viper next time.
I know. That's what I wanted to say. I wanted to be like, you're right. That's not very Christ-like. The whole like hairy leg and a boot that you're licking. Jesus was much more into the whole like, you whitewashed tomb, brood of vipers kind of. So if I'm going to be Christ-like, I need to take it up a notch. That's kind of what I thought I was.
Yeah.
But yeah, standard deal.
Right. And so another thing that we get flack about is victim images. Now, there are some pro-life organizations like the one we formerly worked for that are supportive of the use of victim images, but most pro-lifers do not. They think it's really mean.
To show people the image of what they're doing.
Right. Exactly. To do nothing except hold up a mirror to society, say, here's what you're doing, here's what you're allowing by your apathy. This gets us in a lot of trouble. So there's a freshman senator up there by the name of Jessica Garvin, and she had agreed to meet with us to talk before the session. This is not long after she got elected, probably just a few weeks after that. And we emailed out all the senators and representatives saying, would you meet with us? She responded saying she would, then later canceled the meeting to talk about abolition. The reason she gave was because of the images that we draw of the senators, which are really, really mean. Or not we. When I say we, I mean Russell.
Yeah.
But that Free the States publishes. Now, one of them is, like, say, this one here of Greg Treat and Kim David with a baby who was murdered in abortion in between them. This is really mean.
Yeah.
Then there's this one.
This is probably the one specifically that she's thinking of. She likes Kim David.
Yep.
She said something like Kim David had helped her and encouraged her to be in the fight or something like that, or get in the Senate, or just liked her. And it's a picture, as y'all can see, Kim David ripping Senate Bill 13 in half, sitting on, what does it say? Pro-life laws and Senate norms over a pile of what I mean to be 5,000 murdered children.
Right.
Yes. If you're thinking you drew a picture of me. And then we got the same thing with Greg McCourtney.
Yep.
Greg McCourtney boasted himself as 100% pro-life, right?
Yep. So Greg McCourtney is the chairman who said, or who did not allow SB 13 to come up for a vote in 2020, and then in 2021 he allowed it to come up for a vote, and then voted to kill it. And so you drew that image around the time that he was running for re-election. Yeah. And so is this some awful thing to do, to depict the pro-life politicians who are keeping abortion from being abolished? Depict them in tandem with or on top of babies who are being murdered.
And honestly, I don't do this like out of some kind of weird fascination with making them angry with me. What it is like living in a culture where I think, okay, a certain number of people are going to read a longer article. They're really going to look into it. And it's like, well, kind of amidst all the noise, you got to grab their attention with an image is a general thing. And what I'm trying to do with these pro-lifers that are like on piles of children, I mean, it's brutal stuff. And if I were waking up one day and scrolling through social media and saw this, I mean, I do see stuff like that on social media. Now, I don't ever go, oh, they're being jerks to me. I just kind of like, oh, okay, people are being jerks. But like, I understand, you see a picture of yourself, it's a cartoon, and you're doing something that you don't think you're doing. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason that I'm drawing it the way that I'm drawing is because I'm trying to show what you're actually doing so that people will see it quickly. Mm-hmm. I don't find it unfair. Now, the way some people will be like, yeah, but it's mean. It's like, well, I would rather be true, tell the truth, show it to people so that they would be more mad at the people keeping mass murder of fellow image bearers legal than the person who drew the picture.
Right. Yeah, people who are apathetic in a society that murders children should be forced to be confronted with the evil of abortion and the brutality of it.
Yeah.
Politicians who vote against the abolition of abortion should be forced to acknowledge the brutality of abortion.
Yeah.
People who support abortion should be forced to be confronted with this brutal evil. And so we don't want to overplay the importance of victim images, but victim images are an important part of this. There's people who don't have they're short attention spans because of cell phones and social media, whatever. They're not going to read a whole long article, but you show them abortion, and that's not going to leave their mind.
Yeah, and like abortion next to, like the one that wasn't a drawing, abortion next to this person.
Yeah.
Like I know Greg Treat doesn't like to see Greg Treat abortion because he sells himself as Greg Treat anti-abortion.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, so yeah, it's telling the truth, it's offensive, it's jarring, all that kind of thing, but there's a necessity to it. And one thing I wanted to point out, and like we didn't have this planned, but I just happened to be on Amazon the other day, and I got an update, and it's right here, so I'm going to grab it if I can. But it's actually a book called Slaves Waiting for Sale: Abolitionist Art and the American Slave Trade, and the whole thing is filled with all these illustrations that they did. And one of the arguments that he makes is that the abolitionist would always draw slave auctions, and if you study slave auction art, it's like they would try to draw these characters that are selling or the characters that were waiting to buy them and make them look like the people who are getting these papers. So they would see themselves at an auction block, and so they would think, what would it be like if my wife and my kids were being sold?
Trying to make it personal.
And they would possibly make that auction block guy look a little bit like the guy who's running for office and stuff like that. It's like, well, is this fair? Is this unfair? And so on and so forth. No, it's trying to draw attention to the fact that a lot of people are trying to ignore the fact that there are auction blocks. Well, draw them and put them in. A lot of people are trying to ignore the fact that there's abortion, and the fact that abortion goes on to the tune of $5,000 a year in a pro-life state like Oklahoma. How do you quickly get them to go, you know what? Abortion goes on in pro-life Oklahoma because Kim David values Senate norms and previous pro-life laws, which would have to be repealed to abolish abortion, more than those babies.
Right.
That's why the books and her presence is upon them.
And I think a lot of the times the reason people have problems with images of aborted babies and images like this one, what if they're not the person in the image themselves that you've depicted, it's just because they don't view them as their preborn neighbor. And so if it's any other issue, when someone is trying to make that sin seem worse by depicting it visually, they have no problem with it because they're not a bigot towards the people that are being defended in that case. But in the case of the preborn child, they are ageist and they're just not aware of it.
Right. No one takes an issue with Time magazine, depicting Emmett Till, who was brutally murdered by white supremacists back in 1955, I think. Like no one takes issue with the the pictures of the Syrian refugee boy, face down in the water who had been killed. Right? These images are powerful to shape public opinion, and people get that, except when it comes to abortion, because they don't want to be confronted with their apathy in the midst of the Holocaust. They don't want to be confronted with their, for certain people, complicity in the Holocaust. Yeah. And it's irrefutable. Like, there's no coming back from an abortion victim image if you're a pro-abort. There is none. There's just, you're an awful person, or go F yourself. Like, something really awful and vile is always the response to victim images, because they have nothing. There's nowhere they can go from that. They're wrong and they know it when you confront them with that image. And so the idea that we need to tiptoe around the feelings of pro-aborts, and not show victim images is absurd. I think I don't want to broad brush every single person who's opposed to victim images, but I think at the root of a lot of that opposition is a fear of man, a desire to be liked, because you're not going to be liked when you show victim images. Yeah. But there's no denying its power to shape public opinion. There is none. There's no argument that it's not a powerful tool to shape public opinion. And so it's a very frustrating thing that some people are so opposed to it, and I guess that's something we appreciate about 10% of the pro-lifers, but about 90% of them oppose this, which is very, very, very frustrating.
Yeah, and I think it is this. They have this desire that we would be kind and friendly to the world as we go about fighting a Holocaust, and that is a chief commitment of theirs, and I think that we're violating that. But in this instance, it's pro-lifers who, some of the people we've mentioned are pro-lifers who agree with us that, sometimes you got to do the mean thing and show people their sin. Yep. And so showing a abortion victim in an image is going to be seen as mean by some pro-lifers, but then showing sort of like a vote on an abolition bill and saying these people who have pro-life records and pro-life support and pro-life titles, they're the ones keeping abortion legal. Well, that's that's like showing an abortion victim. It's like, oh, that's too mean. It's like, no, it's the same sort of thing. Yeah. I'm telling the truth about abortion with this image. I'm telling the truth about regulationism with this image. It's graphic. It's 5,000 babies in a pile underneath a pro-life politician and her pro-life laws and her Senate norms. Telling the truth with a graphic reality to wake you up, to get you to see this is the problem with your regulation or your incrementalism. And that is hateful.
So another one which gets us in a lot of trouble is Plexit.
Is Brett Baggett. He gets us in so much trouble that...
Yeah. Let's just put it all on Brett here.
Just put it on Brett. Like anything you ever thought I did, it was actually Brett.
Yeah. So Plexit is a hashtag that got us in trouble with a lot of pro-lifers. There was a what's it called? Pro-life community. I think it was a group on Facebook that a lot of us were a part of. And for a while, it looked like the administrator of that group was kind of drifting toward abolitionism, maybe.
Letting you post, letting you talk.
Right. And she was even promoting, she was kind of doing a both and thing, trying to kind of promote unity trying to create unity. She was promoting abolition events and pro-life events. And then this meme came out. Was it Brett,
this particular one?
It was this particular one of Brett at Abolition Day 2020. And then, you took a part of the speech and put it in the quote there. And
with the hashtag.
With the hashtag. And the hashtag, right, that's extremely, extremely offensive to pro-lifers. And that basically got every abolitionist in that group kicked out of the group. And now it's just a pro-life group who doesn't have anything to do with any abolitionist events or anything.
Way to go.
And there was kind of a previous version of Plexit. It was PAETTPLM.
Yeah, put an end to the pro-life movement.
And these things are extremely offensive. Obviously, of course, to pro-lifers,
because it goes to the heart of the thing. Like abolitionists are wanting to say there's something wrong with the pro-life movement. You got to exit it.
Yeah.
And so Plexit or Padelplum, I guess is the way people said that. The idea was to put an end to the pro-life movement by getting pro-lifers to become abolitionists, and that would abolish abortion, and that'd put an end to the abolitionist movement. Yeah. And usually people would say that, but I think it's like seeing it is kind of like, these people are saying that we are not doing what we say we're doing. They're saying that we're the problem. Haters, it's never like, why are you saying we're the problem? What's your argument? It's like, oh, you're being mean. I've seen people say that this is like the number one thing. Like seeing this thing like makes them I can't remember who it was. Someone actually said, like, just makes my blood boil when I see Plexit.
Yeah.
I like it. I mean, maybe it's mean. I mean, I think that it's obviously from, what's the first thing in Britain? What was theirs?
Brexit.
Brexit,
yeah.
And then there's Texit, and there's Plexit.
Yeah.
I think it's clever, it's strong, it's needed, and is it mean?
Yeah. Again, appropriately so. You can't just take this apart from its context, which in Oklahoma, which is where this rally was held, the people standing in the way are the pro-life politicians, are the pro-life lobbyists.
Yep.
Tony Lounger, Oklahoma faith leaders. These pro-life groups are the ones preventing the abolition of abortion. So in that context, is it harsh to say pro-lifers should exit the movement? Yes. Is it appropriate to say that pro-lifers should stop donating to Oklahomans for Life and Oklahoma faith leaders and instead come support abolitionist projects and events and organizations? Is that an appropriate thing to say given the context? Absolutely.
Yeah. Because
absolutely.
Technically, if they all plexited, abortion would be abolished in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If Kevin Stitt down, every pro-lifer left the pro-life movement ideology and strategy,
yep,
and embraced abolitionism and enforced it, the big conversation going on in the country today would be between like Kevin Stitt and Joe Biden, yep, and it'd be like a face-off of whether or not we had to practice the peculiar institution of abortion in Oklahoma, or whether or not we could criminalize it and protect babies. Like, that would be awesome. And the only way we're going to get that is if pro-lifers become abolitionists.
And it wouldn't even take all of them. It would just take a fraction of them. Like, you need a few people at the top, and then like if we had 1/10 of the Christians in the state of Oklahoma who are consistently going to their legislators demanding abolition or saying, I won't support you unless you do this, coming to rallies, meeting with their legislators, it'd be over. I mean, if you had 1/20th, it would be over.
Yeah, but I do understand why the pro-lifer has a problem with this.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and the thing is like, we're not apologizing for it. Like, we believe this. Like, we really believe that if you got 10% of the pro-lifers who are actively engaged to become abolitionists, like the abolitionists that we believe that we ought to be, you would see massive changes in abolition in our state and a cascading event. I mean, you'd probably set the whole culture free of this thing. I mean, it's major. And so when we say Plexit, I can see why they're kind of like, you're saying that us remaining pro-life is what's keeping abortion legal? Mm-hmm. Yes.
It goes against...
And that hurts pride.
Everything they're doing too, because we looked at last week some of their strategy, like the big tentism type stuff, where they're just trying to get as many people as possible to identify with that very title, pro-life, and we're saying to people, don't do it anymore. Just become an abolitionist, and we'll abolish abortion and get rid of the pro-life movement. That completely goes against everything they're trying to do.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I like what you're saying. Is it mean? Is it true? Appropriately so, you know. I mean, So another one of the accusation is that abolitionists in general, like specifically abolitionists out like at abortion mills or abolitionists in Facebook threads and stuff, are as a whole like a meaner group than pro-lifers that we come across as, I don't know, more. We've seen more dour or more like dark.
Yeah. So, and just to be clear, I've seen pro-lifers and abolitionists act inappropriately out in front of abortion clinics before. Like, I've seen that before.
Oh yeah.
I knew this one pro-life guy who used to sit in his chair and he'd say, if you go and get an abortion, they're going to have to cut your breasts off because of breast cancer. Like, that's what he would yell at the women going in. And I just think it was like the worst possible thing you could say in front of an abortion facility. So that was a pro-life guy. It's like, it's not like there's a lot of people that go in front of abortion clinics that do things incorrectly a lot of the times.
Yeah. But I think it's like abolitionists. We're the ones that are very intent on abortion is murder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Treat it like murder.
Yeah.
And like in various contexts, you know, we have to say that. But then they think abolitionists outside of abortion clinics are just like saying, "You're a murderer, you murderer, murderer," and like by and large, that's not what abolitionists are doing out in front of abortion.
Not even by and large, I would say entirely.
Entirely. I've never seen it. I just want to say like that maybe there's some kind of person that's out there, but it doesn't stop the pro-lifer from basically saying that. I mean, we actually had before, it's kind of inside baseball here, but before Mike Moon carried an abolition bill back in the day when we were trying to get him to do one way back, he was worried about carrying one, and he told me straight up, he said a pro-life organization had warned him about doing things with abolitionists because, quote, the abolitionists down at the abortion clinics call people murderers. Mm-hmm. And I was like, who, which ones, what evidence, like who's saying, but it was just a general, it was like the pro-life leader of whatever, pro-life St. Louis, whatever it was able just to say, these people are mean at the clinics, therefore you should carry some kind of toothless personhood thing.
Yeah. Right. And it's not just about the clinics. I think pro-lifers try to cultivate a very kind of happy warrior type thing. I don't even worry. They probably would even object to that. They want to be right. They like March for Life is like a celebration. It's like it's like music and positivity. Yeah. And like the pro-life groups like Created Equal who go there and actually do try to bring an appropriate tone to what's actually happening, get kind of outcasted because they actually want the thing to be appropriate given what's actually happening. And so they try to cultivate this very positive, happy image.
Oh, yeah. If they could keep Mark and Cunningham off the route, they would do it.
Yeah, and I think those guys. I think those guys will talk about this stuff too. Mm-hmm. That they have an appropriate, and I appreciate like Created Equal, color scheme and font choices and stuff because they're not bubbly. Whenever you see like March for Life using this, it's always like this effeminate like pink and green pastel or purple, and like the billboards like are babies that look like they're almost one, and they say, and it's all this. It is a very soft approach, and they will basically say it's intentional. Now, if you look at abolitionist memes, material, so on and so forth, it has, and as someone who's produced a lot of that, it has been predominantly blacks, whites, black and yellow crime scene tape, reds. There's been a lot of that. And this is a funny thing because this is from someone who's not usually on our radar, but I was speaking with, and this, we'll keep it in here, but I mean, I'm just going to say it. I was at a homeschool convention and we had the abortion in the case of rape quadfold back in the day, AHA Gear one. What about abortion in the case of rape? And it's yellow and black. And I gave one to Todd Friel. And Todd Friel was like, ooh, I think you should do this in like different colors and stuff. Like, who's going to pick this up? It looks like crime scene tape. And I'm like, it's dealing with abortion. And this is like Todd Friel. He's not someone who like kind of, I think, tries to sugarcoat things necessarily.
No, I think he's probably one of the guys who probably takes pride in the fact that he's willing to speak the hard truths. Yeah.
But whenever it was in the pro-life thing, he was to him, he automatically, and this is back to 2013 or whatever, he automatically recognized this does not fit within the aesthetic of our approach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so there's color schemes, there's fonts, and there's that sort of stuff. But then there's also language.
Yep. Messaging. And the difference here, the root of it, is that we are trying to create a conversation around the question of, is abortion murder? Must it be abolished? Like, that's everything we do is about those facts, trying to promote those facts, get people to embrace those facts, act on those facts. The pro-life movement is not trying to do that at all. They're trying to avoid that conversation because that conversation alienates the mushy middle. Like I listened to one of Van Maren's podcasts a long time ago. I think I was a pro-lifer at the time, actually listening to a Van Maren podcast, and he had a guy on, I forget what organization the guy was with, maybe Americans United for Life, some big pro-life organization, talking about the whole strategy is all about winning over the mushy middle. That's how you win in politics. And so you can't say anything that's going to offend the moderates. Yeah. And that's their whole strategy. And so don't call abortion murder, don't call it child sacrifice, anything like that, because moderates aren't going to like you if you say things like that. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is you're never going to create cultural change unless you speak the truth about something.
Yeah.
You'll just play a game of political football. The moderates swing a little this way, moderates swing a little this way. They'll win this election, you win the next one. The ground, the cultural underpinnings never actually shift if you're never going to speak the truth because you're afraid of the moderates. Yeah. And so their whole strategy is just, it's doomed from the start to not create the cultural change that needs to be created. And it's because they don't want to be offensive. They want to be happy. They want people to like them. They don't want to offend anybody. Like even the pro-boards, like they'll say things like, no, you can't call it murder and say it should be abolished, because then the pro-boards are going to get all mad and they'll fundraise off of it and you'll have a more powerful opponent. Like you can't even offend the pro-aborts in the perspective of the pro-lifers.
Yeah, that so-called strategy is a great way to just make sure Christianity has no influence in a culture.
Yep.
It's you don't let Christ be king in all areas of life. You don't mention him. You don't bring him up, and you just give over whatever to the moderates so you can get a little bit, and you end up losing the war that way. That's why I think Christianity is not exactly on the rise in America nowadays.
Yeah. You got pro-lifers that are, okay, we're dealing with this, whatever it is, it's almost 1 million babies aborted every year that we count. Let's try to get 1 million pairs of socks, cute socks, dump them on the lawn of the White House or something, or out in front of Congress, and have a press conference. And it's like, oh, is this inappropriate? And you kind of look at that, and I think that, yes, that's going to cause abolitionists to kind of make jokes. Or it's like you're walking on a college campus and they're giving you cupcakes with like baby feet on them. Mm-hmm. And this is supposed to resonate or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then the abolitionist is going from this point of view of people murder their children. They're living in sin. It's sin covering up sin. It's child sacrifice for self-love, so on and so forth. And that does, cupcakes or God's hatred of sin. I mean, I understand if I were like a secular pro-choicer or whatever, I'd take a cupcake and I kind of make fun of the pro-lifers.
Yeah. Well, so I always use this example, but PETA, for instance, I'm not fond of the people who are associated with PETA at all, but they had this ad a while back. It was like talking about how much pus is allowed in milk. And they just showed all these gross videos. And ever since then, I've had trouble drinking milk. And it's not that I agree with them at all, but behaviorally, I changed a bit because it was so disgusting what they were showing me. And the strategy of like making people have positive emotions associated with pro-life people is going to somehow end abortion is absurd. It's like you have to have very negative emotions, very negative thoughts about abortion in order for you to stop practicing that evil, not positive thoughts about the people who oppose it.
Yeah. No, most definitely.
One of my favorite examples along these lines is when I was talking to a pretty big name pro-lifer. I mean, she speaks at a lot of events, at like high profile events, like the big thing they had in New York. I mean, she's a very high profile pro-life leader. And I was trying to get her to support the abolition bill in Texas. And so we're talking about it. I'm explaining abolitionism to her. She's listening. I think she's getting somewhere. She's starting to get it, starting to come around. And then one day she messaged me. She says, I don't support abolition bills because I don't think that is the way to empower women to choose life, right? So she doesn't want it, the idea that we are going to call abortion murder, say it must be abolished, no, that's too negative. Let's empower women to choose life, right? Very positive terms. And these are so kind of inculcated in her thinking that when something sounds negative, her response is just go, no, we don't abolish abortion or justice for preborn children, no, none of that. Empower women to choose life. It's just like, man, it's just like addiction to not saying anything offensive.
You're like, and what's wrong? I mean, this is where, okay, maybe I'm mean. I guess I'm mean. I don't know. But this is where I'm thinking, like, I want to say, like, is your brain broken? Do you not realize that you sound like a pro-choicer? Like, empower women. That's the pro-choice thing. That's the feminism on the whatever. It's all about empowering women. Yeah. We're not talking about the victims, the children. We're talking about women and helping women to choose life. Now, you're saying choose life, but you're recognizing choice. And the pro-choicers, they believe that women should have the power to choose life or death. Yeah. Now, abolitionists, we are totally against this. And so it's like, I mean, come on. Do you not realize what you're saying?
I don't think they realize how incredibly fake it makes them seem. Because when an abolitionist says, you are doing, like, this is murder, it's child sacrifice, it's evil, you should get rid of it. The person who is looking from the outside looking in. They're looking at the pro-lifer versus the abolitionist, and they're like, who's being consistent with the idea that abortion is killing an innocent human being?
Yeah.
They're looking at the abolitionists, and they're saying that's the consistent thing. But with the pro-lifers, it just looks fake and absurd. It's like you're going to put a bunch of socks.
Oh, yeah.
And somehow that's going to do something to end abortion, as opposed to create, make abortion stigmatized is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
But instead, you're just trying to make yourself seem good.
I have seen some sort of, whether they were like straight up pro-abortion, but they weren't pro-lifers, they weren't abolitionists. They're just on Facebook, and I'm not going to say their names, because I'm like family and stuff, that are kind of like, well, I don't really totally understand you, but I do think that you are being much more honest about the thing, like, and the kind of mock the pro-lifer for sort of playing around with it. And then, of course, you have, the pro-life movement's running around saying like these things like women are being forced and women aren't, able to think about where babies come from or whatever, they're victims of abortion and so on and so forth. And the pro-choice movement is like straight up like shouting their abortion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so what's the response to people who are shouting their abortions? Like calling them genocidal maniacs. Well, is that harsh? It's like, well, they're shouting their abortions and you're running around saying abortion hurts women. And it's like total disconnect and stuff. So trying to be appropriate about it. Again, it only looks mean because of how far off they are.
Yeah. Only if you're detached completely from the context of we live in a Holocaust.
Yeah.
And pro-choicers celebrate it and pro-lifers regulate it and oppose the abolition of it.
Yep.
That's the context. Within that context, being harsh is absolutely appropriate.
Yep.
Now, that's not a license to go beyond what's appropriate, to make all sorts of, whatever attacks that are too far. But that is to absolutely state that a certain amount of harshness is needed. You can't, if you're not being harsh in that context, you're not fighting abortion. Like, you're not doing anything to change the culture, to bring about cultural shift, to bring about repentance. And that's what is needed.
Yeah.
And this is something like the abolitionists of slavery would have mocked this even harder than we are.
Yeah.
I've got a quote here, or I've got two quotes here.
Yeah. And when you read these quotes, I'm always like, man, maybe we are not
Harsh enough. Yeah.
Maybe we too have been affected by our namby-pamby culture.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the abolitionists did not mess around. So this is Rhetoric. I quote Rhetoric a lot. This is a different one than I usually quote, though. But this is still from her pamphlet, Immediate, Not Gradual Abolition. And she says, the beginning of this is her kind of mocking the opposition to her and to the immediate abolitionists. She says, "We are told that you must go cautiously and gradually to work. A very powerful interest and a very powerful influence are against you. You must try to conciliate instead of provoke the West Indian planters, to convince them that their own interest is concerned in the better treatment and gradual emancipation of their slaves, or your object will never be abolished." So she's saying the people who oppose the immediatists are saying, just don't speak so harshly. Don't criticize the slaveholders. They might be, they're good people. They're just not thinking about it rightly. So just kind of tone down your language. Don't call it sin. Don't call it man stealing. Don't call for immediate abolition. Just kind of conciliate to them, and we'll make some sort of gradual gain.
Yeah. And which is, just not to interrupt your quote, but historically speaking, that was a major, they were kind of like, it was so entrenched in their culture. They thought, man, the only way to do this, when Rhetoric is writing this, a number of the abolitionists, like the real abolitionists, had embraced a sort of tone of, trying to, finagle it. So that's going to make sense whenever she, at the end of this quote.
Right. So she continues, "The interests and prejudices of what the West Indian planters have occupied much too prominent a place in the discussion of this great question. The abolitionists have shown a great deal too much politeness and accommodation toward these gentlemen." So basically saying, if we're going to abolish this thing, we've got to speak the hard truth, and we can't worry about being polite to the slave owners.
This is something they learned.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them, the Clarksons, the Wilberforce and stuff, towards the end, they're kind of like, yeah, like Rhetoric is right. Like, we have been, it's crazy that we'd have like a 10-hour long debate about whether this will destroy our economy.
Yeah.
We're loading people up and stacking them, and they are like dying on top of each other as they dysentery across the transatlantic trade. They're dying and they're throwing their bodies to sharks. And we're having a debate about whether it hurts the economy of the sugar plantations,
or even the like feelings of the slave owners,
or like how do we do this in such a way that it's not going to make them feel bad. I mean, it's crazy, and so like they kind of came along to it, and there was a growth at this time, and then in America, because a lot of the American abolitionists ended up following kind of this Hirician type abolitionism.
Yeah, her pamphlet influenced a lot of American abolitionists.
A lot of the
Garrisonians.
Garrison,
and then Garrison influenced all the American abolitionists.
And it was because they took on a much more prophetic tone, and they were very, very purposeful about that. It was more like, we don't need to be talking about how Britain can be improved by getting out of the trade. We need to be calling Britain to repent of their blood guiltiness. And so in America, it was repent of our blood guiltiness, repent of our hypocrisy of saying we're the land of the free, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. By the way, have you seen, a third of our population or whatever, it wasn't a third, but, they were calling them out for their hypocrisy, and it was taking on that tone. Now, we're abolitionists too. We've learned from them, and we haven't had to deal with this as much. And I think that we are influenced by our culture, but there is a desire to raise the prophetic alarm. And anytime anyone says that we're not being nice enough, I think we should say, listen, I don't want to sin, but are you telling me that I'm not being nice enough about the mass murder of, what's going on? And it's like, have you not seen the image of like the head being removed from the baby, or like the little feet coming down the speculum, or, what in the world? You're telling me to calm down? This is absolutely ridiculous. But it's how far our culture is away from our blood guiltiness and wants to cover it up. And the pro-life movement is helping them do that. Yep. Not the whole this is one point where I think you guys are good to bring up repeatedly, not the entire pro-life movement. There are plenty of pro-life people who do.
Yeah, who get this part right.
Who get this part right.
Yeah.
What they don't get right, so they'll trot out the toddler to prove that abortion is murder or whatever, blah, blah, blah. No, they don't like it when we trot out the toddler to prove that their incrementalism is wrong.
Right.
So we're working on it. So, yeah, I like how you have the other, there was a famous quote. I can't remember. It was George Hunter. I can't remember the whole context, but they were saying, Garrison, you're all on fire. It's just like everywhere you go, you're just like, can you not chill? It's just like you're constantly on fire. Can you just calm it down a little bit? And he said, I have need to be all on fire, for there are mountains of ice all around me to melt. And so there is a appropriateness to the fact that we would be what they call mean. As someone said, truth sounds like hate to those who hate truth.
Yep.
What we're saying in speaking the truth about the blood guiltiness of our culture is going to burn, or is going to be bright, is going to be fierce, is going to be fanatical. It's all going to be like that. And the reason we burn so hot is because we are surrounded by mountains of ice, apathy. Like, we would not have to be this way if it weren't the way that it actually is.
Yeah.
We actually are in this.
Yeah, and there's another Garrison quote, probably the more well-known one, that's also really good. He's talking about in his original edition of the Liberator. He says, tell the mother to moderately rescue her babe from the flames of the house fire. Mm-hmm. Or tell the husband to moderately rescue his wife from the hand of the ravisher. Right, like in those circumstances, to expect moderation or like a careful tone from people in those circumstances, or careful action, is absurd, right? Those are urgent situations that should be treated with urgency. And to demand moderation is actually what's insane. Yeah. And it's actually not insane, but it's dehumanizing toward the victims.
Totally inappropriate.
Well, I just think that our culture now, I don't think any level of anger would be permissible to our culture. And that's including the pro-life movement. They always seem like this robotic, fake group of people who are not actually human at all, and they just sort of have like this constant like disposition where they don't seem like they're ever angry. But if you look at what the scripture says, God is angry. Like it looks at the wrath of God so much. And should the Christian never be like that? Should they never be angry about the murder of their preborn child? And should their language never reflect that? No, it should reflect that. It gives proper weight to it, and the pro-life movement does not. They're incapable of giving proper weight to that.
Yeah. No, and I do think on the whole we are not guilty of being too harsh. We're probably guilty of not being harsh enough. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to use the word harsh in the sort of the way like unjustifiably mean, but I think that we have, out of a desire not to look crazy, out of a desire to be accepted, be heard, have moderated our tones in various places that we've done because we think this is the only way to be heard.
Yeah, you have to earn the ability for you have to earn the right to talk to somebody.
Yeah, and there's this. There's something. There is an appropriate, think about like your context or your audience and so on and so forth. Like if I think. Like, for instance, if I think doing a certain thing is going to keep them from hearing me, I won't do that thing. So I will modify what I'm doing. But in the same sense, I'm not going to say that thing that I was going to do that was going to keep them from hearing me was therefore evil. Like one of the examples that I may have used here before, but in this idea of like church repent projects, like everyone kind of agrees 100 million Bible-believing churches in the nation, where you have child sacrifice going on.
Bible-believing Christians, not churches.
Oh, yeah, Bible-believing,
yes.
Christians. Hundreds of thousands of Bible-believing churches. Yep. There's sort of like this abolitionist rhetoric of children are being murdered in the shadows of steeples. This is a true thing. It sounds harsh. It sounds, for people who, so like in Norman, I can't remember how many churches we have, up to 100 churches here in Norman surrounding the Child Sacrifice Center.
Yeah.
And so early on, there's this sort of impulse, like we gotta get the churches involved. Now, praise God, there are churches sending people to the abortion mill on a regular basis out here.
Yep.
But they're still a small, Christ the King, some Christians from Purcell, it's still a small.
It's probably two or three out of 100.
Yeah, and so it's pretty pathetic. But the impulse of kind of like, well, we got to wake these churches up. Let's like go to churches, tell them about abortion, show them abortion images, and say, hey, this is a love your neighbor issue. So there was like an impulse to do that, to talk to pastors, to talk to like Sunday school teachers and leaders and ministry leaders. And there was sort of a slam door, and it's like, okay, well, we'll go stand in their parking lots with like pictures of the babies, and we'll hand out things to their people because the gatekeepers are keeping us out. And like that, not from the pro-lifers, but from other Christians, just in general, was seen as hateful. Like as we talked about, that was jihadi stuff. Like that Christians in our culture were going to churches where Christians met to say they're murdering children. We should do something about it, and handing out little pieces of paper and holding signs proving it was considered like a hate crime, a violation of safe space. And because it was always getting in the way of like getting people to think about abolitionism, the tenets, what a bill would look like and all that kind of stuff, it became decreased as a tactic because it just wasn't resonating. But every time I've said like, well, I don't stand out in front of churches with abortion images. I don't stand in parking lots on Sunday mornings because in our culture, that is seen as an attack. Like there were people who called that an attack on the bride of Christ. Mm-hmm. And that is a version of exactly what we're talking about. Like those people, and at that time it was like that guy, T. Russell Hunter, is sending these people to attack the bride of Christ.
That is the sign of a culture that is a completely unpersecuted church, to think that going and calling them to repent is an attack on the church.
Sometimes holding signs that literally said, this is not a protest. I can't remember what they say. This like something, and they're like, and then they'd be like mocking us. Like, it's like, this isn't we're here to like reason with you. Come let us reason. It's like, these are your neighbors. Like, who are you in the parable of the Good Samaritan? Now, tactically, whether that worked or didn't work because of, 30 years before, the devil has Westboro doing something with signs. And so it just, tactically, whether it worked or not is one question. But I'd always say like, I stopped doing that because I found you could reach people through things like the Dan Fisher campaign or pamphlets, or whatever, you could reach people in different ways. I never said that was sinful, because there's a part of me that says it's so inadequate. Like, there are people there are people murdering babies on Monday morning, and here, like half a mile away, there are people that are worshiping God Sunday before. You know about this, and these people aren't doing anything about it except for filling up baby bottle change and stuff, whatever. They're doing whatever. Like, is it inadequate to show them this evil and say, we ought to be doing something about this? Take into consideration the word of God, the prophets of God, the law of God. What would Jesus do? Like, there's a part of me that's like, I don't want to go on record with this, but like going into the church, coming into the church, yelling and screaming, they're murdering children all around us all the time. Would that be sinful? It's hard to say that it would be.
If it was about born babies and the church, that happened at a church, I don't think the pastor would be mad about it. I think the pastor would thank the man for warning them about born babies being killed down the street from them, and then he would go and act.
Yeah, but, 1 out of every 100 pastors is murdered every week in the United States of America, because there's a right to murder your pastor when you don't like what he preached on Sunday. Mm-hmm. It would be totally appropriate to stand out in front of churches advocating for a law against that.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to say that the Church Repent Project is something that's worth talking about and thinking about. But I'm thankful that abolitionists everywhere pretty much agree there needs to be repentance on the part of the church. Whether or not that tactic got to the heart of the problem is a question worth debating. But I don't think it was ever an attack on the church. And I don't think that anytime an abolitionist, myself or anyone, was attacking pro-life arguments were ever attacks on the people or the motives of the pro-lifers. It's just always been, hey, you're pointing out something that's kind of uncomfortable, or maybe we're in the wrong, and instead of me dealing with what you're pointing out, I'm going to say it's an attack. And of course, none of this would have been seen as too harsh or mean if people had a right and inadequate view of the preborn human.
Right. If people viewed the preborn children really as one of us, the idea that we must submit to the Supreme Court's opinion that they can be murdered would be laughable. Like if you said that, you would just get laughed at by people who actually view that child as fully human. Like that's absurd.
Or probably worse than laughed at.
Yeah, get stuff thrown at you.
Yeah, you mean you cad? What in the world?
Yeah, what's wrong with you, right? But it's because the victims are preborn, and we don't see their murders. We're not forced to be confronted with that evil.
If Joe Biden tries to, and this would be in character with him, but if he tries to, legalize child molestation tomorrow, I think most people would say we're not going to listen to that.
Yeah. The Supreme Court, we're going to codify pedophilia, and the Supreme Court upholds it in some weird way.
Mm-hmm.
Like
every state in the union,
would be like, yeah, well, maybe not.
Right.
But
probably not California.
Yeah. I mean, like you would have. Hey. Yeah.
Oh, we're evil, not that evil.
Yeah. I mean, you'd have some people coming out of the woodwork all of a sudden, you'd be like, oh my gosh, you've been that evil. But outside of that, like everyone would, let's just go Christians, churches, pastors would all be like, oh, to hell with the Supreme Court. They're not God. They would be acting that way. And you're like, oh, wait, but why weren't you acting that way towards abortion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we're pointing out the fact that they're not acting that way towards abortion, and that's what they don't like.
Right.
We're attacking them.
And William Lloyd Garrison wrote a really good, I guess it's kind of a poem about this subject. And he writes, why is American slaveholding not in all cases sinful? Because its victims are black. Why is gradual emancipation right? Because the slaves are black. Why is immediate emancipation wrong, dangerous, impracticable? Because the slaves are black. Why ought 1/6 portion of the American population be exiled from their native soil? Because they are black. Why would the slaves, if emancipated, cut the throats of their masters? Because they're black. Why are slaves not fit for freedom? Because they're black. And it goes on. I won't read the whole thing.
Yeah.
But basically, every single objection to the immediate abolition of slavery, if you really get to the root of it, It's because people were prejudiced against black people.
Yeah.
And if it was any other race of people back in this time, and like if white people were enslaved, then the white people would have not dreamed of objecting to the immediate abolition of the slavery. But it's because the people were prejudiced against black people, and so they tolerated slavery. They tolerated gradualism in opposition to slavery. But it all falls apart. Every incremental argument, every bow to the Supreme Court argument falls apart if you truly, in your heart of hearts, act upon the fact that preborn children are equal to you and me. It all falls apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in his context, and this is William Lloyd Garrison, who was constantly being accused of being too mean.
Yep.
And we are justifiable in rejecting abolitionism because there's this guy in Boston with a paper and he's crazy or he's mean or whatever. And it's because he's publishing stuff like this. And the reason is, and this is, he's pointing out the fact that if you think about this issue as a perspective of it's you or your family or people of your race or of your, nationality, you wouldn't tolerate it at all. Because he wanted them to understand that whenever they're calling for abolition and someone comes and says, oh, it must be gradual. You're like, do you think it must be gradual if we're talking about white people? Oh, well, if it's white people, it doesn't have to be gradual. Getting them to think about that.
Yeah.
Like, do you think it should be regulated if it was toddlers? Like, before you murder a toddler, you have to see whether the toddler is 3 or not. If they're 3, they have to be protected.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, wait, no. Incrementalism and regulationism are absolutely evil in response to the murder of toddlers.
Yeah.
Oh, so why is incrementalism okay?
Yeah. Because
they're not yet born.
So wrapping up this discussion, this topic, we do want to make very clear, again, just reiterate that it is the ideas that are so offensive. And in cases where either the three of us or other abolitionists have gone too far beyond what was necessary and appropriate, beyond that necessary level of harshness, we apologize and we want to not do that. And so for the abolitionists out there watching, don't do that. Don't go beyond what's appropriate, but do be harsh as is appropriate. And then a certain level of harshness is appropriate, is necessary. If you're not being harsh in a culture that murders its children, you're not doing it right. You're not really doing it at all. You're not changing the culture.
Yeah.
So we've got to do that. We hope we made that clear.
Yeah. I would love if the only thing that was keeping people from becoming abolitionist was simply because I had been mean.
Yeah.
I would love that because I would just have to be like, hey, I've been mean. Sorry, my bad. And then okay, well then we'll be abolitionist. But that's just not true.
You would buy a cupcake stand so quick.
Oh yeah, I'd be passing out cupcakes inside little baby booties, and we just abolish abortion. Yeah. I wish that it was that I had been too mean, but the fact of the matter is, and think it's mean all you want, that's not what it is. That's been kind of an excuse. Yeah. But wherever I've been mean or whatever, I don't want to be mean. We don't want to be mean, and we don't want abolitionist thinking. That's our mode. Let's just go be mean. No, the mode is speak the truth in love. Yep. And to speak the truth in love, you can't moderate the truth. Mm-hmm. And when you speak the truth in a culture that kills its children or tolerates the killing of children or regulates the killing of children, people are going to call that truth hate, or they're going to call it mean. I think that's what I have been by and large guilty of. Yep. And I've spent a lot of time opening myself to examination on that account. Yeah. And maybe we'll end with this. There's this idea that somehow I've become less mean, and I'm
you're trying to repaint history.
Yeah, I'm trying to repaint history.
Towards you.
And I'm like, I actually don't think that that's true. And there's a certain sense where it's like, I think early on I was probably more prone to being like, well, I don't want to say that. I don't want to say that. And like, now I'm kind of getting to the point where it's like, no, I want to say it. And I don't care if it hurts your feelings, if it's true. Assess whether what we're saying is true. Mm-hmm. Be manly in the sense of, just own, like, what is the argument? Like, look past them. And like, in a certain sense, like if there's something, and I know we're going to end this episode and I go, if there's something that I'm actually like wrong, like say like I was, an elder or a pastor in a church, and I was in an adulterous relationship with like a secretary, and a young man stood up in the middle of the service and called me out. That would technically be in violation of what the apostle told Timothy, or what he wrote in Titus. When you rebuke an elder, go with someone else, so on and so forth. And it probably wouldn't be the best tactic, right? But if I were truly in the error and being called out, how wrong would it be for you to stand there and rebuke the young person for calling you out on this sin? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, there have been times where I've been wrong or you've been wrong, and the person who's brought this wrong thing that you're doing to you has done it in an inadequate way. Yeah. The proper response is to deal with what they're saying. If what they're saying is true, you can say, I repent of this, I change. And then you can say, the way you brought it to me, not necessarily the best way. But like, that is the adequate response to abolitionism. If you think that we've been mean, like, move beyond it, kind of say like, okay, I'm not going to like justify my non analysis of your arguments by you being mean. I think that is oh man, this is mean, the most pathetic response to abolitionism you can possibly, like, you've given me a 24-page pamphlet on the components of an abolition bill. Well, I'm not going to read this because T. Russell Hunter once said something on Facebook, 2013. I've got screenshots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so this might be a good point in the show.
Mean.
I think appropriately so.
But it's true. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think this video will get watched by a lot of pro-lifers because this has been a discussion, like you said, on some
I just want to make
posts.
sure that I didn't, that was me right now being that way, not me in the past. So I refuted the whole, like, I'm trying to calm it down.
Yeah, so this has been a discussion amongst pro-life leaders who've kind of started addressing abolition again, like Seth Gruber and Jonathan Van Maren and them. And so I think there will be pro-lifers watching this. So for the pro-lifers watching this, now you've heard kind of our explanation of why we're harsh and where, why certain things are justified, a certain level of harshness is justified. Now, please go watch episode 4, right? The biblical arguments for abolition. Actually consider it, hear the argument out, respond to that, not respond to some, screenshot of Russell's 2014 comment on some random post that may or may not even exist, right? Mm-hmm. So please go engage with the arguments.
Yeah, if Jonathan Van Maren, if you chose to watch this episode, go watch that episode as well, because you admitted yourself that you don't know what we're saying theologically. And
so yes, if you're a pro-lifer, go watch episode 4. Please engage with our actual arguments, not with screenshots that happened 6 years ago on some random post or something. So please engage with the arguments. If you're already an abolitionist, please share this video, subscribe wherever you're listening to this, or like on Facebook, or subscribe on YouTube or podcast apps. Become a donor to Free the State, so we can put more of this stuff out there, create more written content, video content, all that stuff. Go to freethestates.org/donate, get your name in the bucket to win the art and all that good stuff. And we hope to see you next week on the Liberator podcast. We've got a really good episode for you next week. We've got abolitionist pastors who are bringing a resolution on abolishing abortion to the national SBC. So this is going to be a really good episode, a really cool thing that's going on in mid-June here. And so we're really excited to have them on to talk about it, and we hope you will join us for it.